Good morning, friends. Welcome to OBEJournal 2019, number 5. Some of the themes touched upon in number 4 are experienced and commented on by out-of-body explorer from England called V. Van Dam. I have a couple of his books from the late 80s, early 90s, and he's gone largely unremarked. As far as I can see, I don't see anyone referencing his work. I'm not sure why, because it's very good. Original, powerful, thoughtful. Small publisher, perhaps, Scoob Books in England. I did find the book here in Canada. I bought a couple of them, and you can order them through the usual places on the internet. But I've been meaning to read them for a long while, and I think the points that came up on the last video, number 4, is quite relevant to this. Very good out-of-body explorer. And it's largish work, so obviously I'll be quoting sections. Once I had learnt to induce projections at will, I found I could project serially during any one period, i.e., go in and out of my body repeatedly. The first time I managed to do this, I went up to the window of my bedroom, the astral equivalent of my bedroom, that is, only to be faced with a different scenery on each occasion, for reasons which I did not understand. Some of these locations appeared to be outside England, Holland or Sweden, for example. Others seemed to be part of the past, although they seemed to bear something of a relationship with the physical location in which I was living. And others yet appeared to be related to part of the near future. I began to appreciate that 1. The activities on the astral plane could precede similar events on the physical plane. 2. The astral plane harbored several time zones. 3. That a window could be used as a switchboard to reach any number of different, and for the most part, unrelated astral locations. What really struck me was the clarity of what I saw, and I was particularly conscious of the bright sunshine which poured in through the window, and the sense of physical-like touch I experienced as I deliberately ran my fingers up and down the window frame. It all seemed so unbelievably real. First place I perceived was a location in what might have been Holland. There were tall grasses in front of the window, then a walkway, then a canal. Beyond the canal were multi-story houses with wooden beams, and it seemed to be early mid-morning. I didn't see anyone walking around. The sunshine was luxurious, and everything was very peaceful. There was an atmosphere of simple contentment here. It filled me with a sense of well-being. During a subsequent projection, I saw a railway depot and some old, yet somehow new, highly polished locomotive engines which were standing on side tracks. There were stacks of coal at intervals and a few warehouses and workshops on the far side, and also to my right. A few seconds later, I saw a workman wearing dungarees who was about to enter part of the building to my left. I waved at him, and he waved back before disappearing through a doorway. Toward the end of this sequence of projections, 8 in all, I found myself confronted by what seemed to be the equivalent of the physical location where I was living, yet it appeared to be slightly ahead in the future. I flew down one of the back streets and noticed several models of cars, some of which were known to me and others which I had never seen before. During the last projection, I was just about to go toward the window again when an unbelievable being came through the wall to me. His shape was that of a thin grey spiral, rotating clockwise from bottom to top. And although I had absolutely no idea of what he was, I had never consciously seen anything like this before, I sensed that he was male, very intelligent, if not advanced, and some part of me even seemed to recognize him. I could identify counter movements in the loops which would slow down, then catch up with themselves to rejoin the main movement. Something passed between us, a sort of telepathic accord. He was going to take me somewhere, but as he went through the wall, I found I couldn't follow him, and I found myself back in my physical body. During the series of projections, I began to notice for the first time I wasn't always re-entering my physical body in a spatial sense. My astral consciousness was beginning to phase back to the physical consciousness instead. I would seem just to run out of enough energy to sustain a projection, and I would find myself back in my body. Secondly, I could not think of any logical reason for the randomized location selection process I had just experienced, except, at best, that some part of my mind was perhaps responsible for these choices. Now, I know a lot of you have that similar experience, and I think these are early days for him, so he gets more confidence later, but that sense that something else is directing you. Sometimes it feels like guides, and sometimes it feels like higher self. During another cluster of projections, I had just rolled out of my body by gripping the edge of the mattress with my left hand and pulling myself out, thereby overcoming the bonding force. I went out of my bedroom and decided to fly down the stairs instead of walking down, which I usually did. In mid-flight, I thought of trying to change the shape of my astral body from male to female, and my astral body complied with a split second. I had hardly made any effort to effectuate the change, but then I felt a lot of stored energy within me. The more energy you have, the easier it is to do something of this sort. I went into the living room, and there I saw a young, hippie-looking character looking very sorry for himself. I put my right palm out towards him and sprayed him with a bright blue energy from a chakric point in the middle of my hand. I don't know if this really helped him at all, because I found myself back in my body. Subsequently, I found that every time I induced or else spontaneously experienced a female astral body, it was the same one. Long blonde hair and a different feeling of self and identity from my normal personality. Later, I realized that this process was being influenced by my solar deva. I found myself traveling in space. I had not projected consciously out of my body. Within seconds, I perceived a sphere-like spaceship which appeared to be silver-colored, yet far from any star. Therefore, its surface seemed grey and uniform. I went straight through the hull, only to find myself in a domed room whose walls were fluorescent. The panels were of different prismatic colors, and they appeared to be made from some sort of plastic energy metal. The overall layout was very pleasant, even artistic, and in some respects it corresponded very much to my tastes. What drew my attention more keenly was the fact that I was facing about 10 to 15 extraterrestrial beings who were all smiling at me, and they seemed to have been expecting me. They were androgynous, of a slim human-like build, and about 5 feet 2 to 3 inches tall. They all had long golden hair, and they all wore a type of skin-tight garment which was rainbow-banded, although each suit was slightly different with regard to the color sequences and widths of the bands. One of them came towards me, the one who was furthest to the left, and he almost seemed female to me. The blend of male and female traits was so finely balanced that I could feel a certain quality of energy coming from her, which was both strong and delightfully soft. He radiated a lovely, friendly, harmonious energy, which I've only experienced while under their influence. She put her hands up, and I responded quite naturally by doing the same. I placed my palm against hers, and then we joined our foreheads at the Anya points. That's the third eye. I had to lower my head a little to allow for a difference in height. Suddenly I became infused with telepathic global impressions which were informing me. Better yet, were reminding me that first of all I was one of them. The sense of belonging was very strong and undeniable. Secondly, that we came from a planet and solar system in the galaxy Andromeda. M31-NGC224, according to earthly astronomical standards. Earthly. And then I was flooded with other impressions, in fact, so many of them that I can scarcely remember them all in detail. And I'm sure a number of you have had that download experience. And I was shown that we were multidimensional beings, that our primary purpose was to unite the consciousness of the galactic beings of Andromeda and this galaxy, plus one another, and much more, all within the space of a few seconds. Then I was told that I could not be allowed to stay with them any longer at a conscious level, otherwise the experience or the remembering would actually provoke my disincarnation, i.e., I would probably die. In retrospect, I can understand this fully. If I had remembered much more, I wouldn't have wanted to return to Earth and the constrictions of a human body and brain. Since that time, I have received their communications and channelings and been shown certain visual impressions of our planet of origin. Brackets, Atales in. We have spoken a language which is used for song and magical ritual. Otherwise, we use impulse and open telepathy. The main planet was not very densely populated, and most of us lived in small domes or globes which were peppered around the countryside. Mostly sandy soil with a great variety of vegetation. There were also lakes and waterfalls, and pools of water warmed by the white-hot sun. Alrang, a bigger star than Sol. The sky was blue turquoise, and the climate seemed semi-tropical, although I was only shown certain areas. We had crystal cities with tall conical spires for certain types of magical practices, and large domes, etc. There was also a testing ground, a portion of land which was full of dark stalagmite projections of stones and otherwise barren, where we would deliberately go alone to fight demon-like creatures who for the most part were quite playful. We would fly around these projections trying to outdo each other, and the contest was neither too serious nor was it lethal. My feeling is that originally we were a fairly childlike race whose main preoccupation in life was to pursue all manner of artistic and creative undertakings, and the rest of the time we were either practiced our natural magic or else we were just at liberty to enjoy ourselves. The main planet had a moon which was terraformed, and it was about half the size of Atales In, which was the 5th planet in that system. About 21 million years ago, we departed from there, spreading out through the Andromeda galaxy, then on to other galaxies, allying ourselves with the purpose of our parent galactic being. While figures are probably quite irrelevant, since I have been only shown small fragments of this past, I have been told that those of our own planet are now represented in 89 galaxies. My own group came to this galaxy, and I was shown the process of approach that we used, which in nuts and bolts terms would be the equivalent of traveling at a staggering number of parsecs per second in what can only be called hyperspace. again, according to what I have been told, which I'm not really in a position to personally verify yet, I might add, my group has visited and then anchored itself to a number of planets in this galaxy before we came to the Earth 25,000 years ago. The group being, which we are, had sent different fragments of itself down into incarnation from time to time, and as individuals we take turns at overshadowing each other, while those of us, few, who are incarnated during any one period, work our way out of the mess we usually find ourselves in as a result of interacting with much denser energies than we are normally accustomed. We have made our inputs and contributed to the Earth's civilizations, yet only in a small way. We are not a very big group, and talking in present terms, I've been told that there are over 12,000 different groups presently around Earth. Some interacting, yet most on standby, just observing and monitoring humanity's evolution and progress. I know all this reads like science fiction, but then so does most of this manual. I cannot really apologize for that. I've also been told that our group will remain here for another 400 years or so before it will travel on to another planet, which is apparently in much far worse state than Earth. Thus, progressively we go from worse to worse, not only to help out the evolution of any given planet, but also to test ourselves in the process. Although we are not human, we are a fusion of Davic and original race energies and consciousness. We do or can use bodies of a certain type. We have retractable, highly sensitive antennae, just for good measure, which we use for fine-tuning into certain energies. However, we do not need those bodies on the higher planes. Our spaceship is as much a being in its own right as is the expression of a mental and spiritual technology, which is unknown on Earth at this time, though the ship could be lowered into the physical wavelengths of energy, dense matter. We have absolutely no intention of doing so. For various reasons, three of these being, our energies would catalyze too many reactions. It is not advantageous for us to do this. It would represent a quite unnecessary risk. And three, it is prohibited by cosmic law, to which all space groups subscribe, except for some of the lesser groups which are more negative. These are kept at bay for most part. Presently, we have amalgamated our forces with those of other groups so as to coordinate our energies in such a way that various events will be precipitated during the next 100 years or so, bringing about fundamental changes for the planet, according to the request of the Earth's planetary spirit. These changes will benefit humanity immensely. Now, I know some of you have had experiences similar to this, or hints thereof, so I thought it would be useful for you to hear that. I found myself out of my body, but this time somewhere far away. I knew I was in another solar system. To my right there was a huge star whose color was undescribable. It was a color I had never consciously seen before, a combination of red tinged with blue, lilac, cerise, mauve, and violet. It was extremely beautiful. I was mildly surprised to notice that space was blue here instead of black. I could not see any other stars in the distance, and I presumed that the ethereal blue color of this space was masking them. I traveled onwards into the system, feeling very relaxed. I had no idea at all why I was here, but one of the peculiarities of projecting is that astral consciousness seldom reacts to a strange environment. It appears to accept anything which is happening, and it is only the logical part of us which finds something to grate about. True. The quality of energies in this star system was entirely different to anything I'd experienced elsewhere, and I find it difficult to find words which would describe it adequately. I did not feel at home here, but I did not feel ill at ease either. The energies were restful, even the star seemed peaceful, quite regardless of its magnitude. There were no flares, its surface was without a single sunspot. I presume it was bigger than the sun. Bigger than the sun. Shortly afterwards, I came across a planet, perhaps the first one orbiting the star in that system. It had an atmosphere, and it was covered with white cloud formations. Although I could see part of the underlying surface was predominantly dark blue, verging on indigo. I was a bit astonished to find that this planet seemed to rearrange its cloud formations to make up a face. Or else it projected this image onto the cloud surface, and it was female. Now, was I imagining this, or did it really happen? I found it difficult to reject my perceptions. I was seeing a perfectly well-defined face, yet I could not understand why a planetary being should react to my presence in this fashion. What was it trying to say to me? Here's a quote. I am alive. I am a being I think and feel. Perhaps. Up until now, the experience had been perfectly objective. Now there was this subjectivity which was alien to me. I was very aware of the fact that I was a single projector in an unknown part of the galaxy. I was insignificantly small, a piece of nothing in a vastness. The face remained unchanged, static. But somehow this planet was conveying a feeling to me. It seemed almost happy to acknowledge my presence, as if it didn't experience many visitors. Nevertheless, it appeared to remain detached from me. I felt that it had taken archetypal information from my mind and projected a human-like face for my benefit. I did not feel that this face necessarily represented any evolution of its own, although I could perfectly well be wrong. It did not seem to be expressing anything for me. I cannot explain this experience any farther, and then I found myself back in my physical body after a while. I woke up one morning and was immediately aware of that I could project, which I did with ease. As I lifted out of my body, I found myself showered by a downpouring of radiant, powerful white light. Sparks, globules, streams of brilliant light substance, to be more accurate, which lent even more power to the projection. I rose into the air, feeling ecstatic and free, and with my arms thrown back, my astral body naked, although thoroughly uninhibited. As I rose further, the power of the light then became too strong for me to bear, upon which a higher force shielded me from this light and produced a velvety black space instead. I still felt its enormous power, however. I instantly felt an immense love for what I recognized as the planetary spirit. And in an absolutely natural way, I found myself trusting it implicitly. It is difficult to describe a meeting with such a being. The feeling I got was of ultimate friendliness. Although I was a lesser being by a very wide margin, it was treating me in some ways as an equal. I loved it totally in return. Then I saw two words in letters of fire against an apparent void. Two names with a sign of equation between them. One of them I knew well. The other one was a symbolic spiritual name. While I haven't gone out of my way much to do so, I have created whole environments just by projecting them mentally. The shocking thing is that they can seem so real that even close and meticulous scrutiny only reveals that the mind is incredibly powerful on the astral plane. I've also created other astral bodies, well, body shells at any rate. On one occasion I became astrally consciousness, but without projecting. I thought of the shape of a young woman lying on top of me, and she appeared, almost instantly. The body was well defined, but it felt like a shell, empty of any individual life. It felt like a body should, although somewhat light in weight. Later I did the same thing, but this time I tried to impart something of my own life force to the form. Almost immediately it took on life, moving the way I wished. Then I projected my consciousness into the form, and I found that I was looking out through its eyes, down at my male body. Then I went back to my male body, and then back to the form again. Then I attempted to spread my consciousness into both bodies at once. Suddenly I had dual vision. I was seeing myself from both points of view. I was able to move the form while my consciousness was within it, as if it was my own astral body, and I was able to move it when my consciousness was in my male body, although it then seemed more like another person. These experiments can be pushed a lot farther, and I did. I managed not to impart only my life force to any given shell which I'd created, but was able to give it a sense of independent personality, which would then generate its own patterns. Interaction with this creation was then identical to a relationship with another being. Beings as thought forms, an intriguing possibility, and argues, that we are thought forms. We are holographic projections from another plane. All fascinating metaphors. I think you'll agree. Another point, he talks about astral devas. Devas are the beings who literally are the embodiment of energy. They are responsible for the construction of the planes. Let that sink in. Those who are astral are the embodiment of the energies of the astral plane. There are various types of astral devas, and these range from small nature spirits to enormously powerful entities who preoccupy themselves with the organization of various activities which regulate, maintain, inspire, and improve on the energy conditions to be found on this plane. Where and when relevant or possible, they have intercourse and will work with humans in order to further these ends. From time to time, devas may make themselves known to you, usually with a purpose in mind, or else you may perceive them at work. Here is a shortened account by way of an example of the activity of a small nature deva. I found myself in a hemp plantation. The sun was shining brightly and everything felt relaxed and serene. A few seconds later I saw a small ovoid-shaped hemp deva who was approaching me from the outer periphery of the plantation. He was striated with rainbow-colored bands of energy and moving through the air with great, unhurried ease, about a meter from the ground. He passed by me without stopping and disappeared amongst the hemp plants. I stayed here for a short while, feeling good here. Then I found myself back in my body. Here is another account involving one of the greater devas. I emerged in an unknown location astrally and could see a valley in front of me, followed by a long, flat hilltop in the background. Then suddenly a gigantic female form appeared from behind the hill, as if she had been waiting for me to reach that particular place. Knowing that I would arrive, perhaps even responsible in some unknown way for my projection there, she rose into the open sky and turned her head in a semi-profile to me while still watching me and smiling, then raised her hands and arms in a fascinating stroboscopic movement of rainbow light, high above her head until they met. It was a dance of artistic joy, a beautiful spiritual gesture, a form of exquisite communication, and the size of her body was just for emphasis. I know that I cannot find the right sort of words to describe what I saw or what I felt. The human language, especially English, is so limited. Then I found myself back in my physical body, feeling blissfully elated, if not rapturous. This is just one of those experiences which you do not forget, and which continues to inspire you for a long time to come. I felt my solar deva come up behind me while I was standing. This is another account, by the way. And this account did not happen in a projected state, but while conscious in the physical body, but psychically open during meditation. Felt my solar deva come up behind me while I was standing, facing towards the south, and she enveloped me with a fluttering, soft yet powerful energies, which made me think instantly of wings, energy wings. She then entered into my body, and then fused with me until we were one in consciousness, one being standing in one place, yet on various levels simultaneously, her golden and silver light radiating around me, us. These three accounts will give you some idea of the sort of experiences you may have. The full range of possibilities is nearly infinite. Therefore, they can only inspire you somewhat to the regard of these possibilities. They're not fully representative. Yes, your solar deva. If you Google the phrase solar deva, you'll see it's used in other occult literature. I think the Alice Bailey works. I haven't Googled it recently, but if you just put solar deva in there, you will get quotes from books other than this. And in occult terms, a solar deva, that is like an advanced nature spirit, is part of our being. That as you ascend through the various levels of your being, you will at some point encounter the level that is a solar deva. That's worth thinking about. While solar devas can manifest themselves or part of themselves on the astral plane, their natural habitat is on the higher mental plane and Buddhic plane. They represent a higher part of our overall self. This brings us to a consideration of the soul. What is the soul? Imagine for a moment that you are a being who needs the physical incarnational experience in order to become stronger and more capable. That you know that you are going to need several, if not hundreds of incarnations in order to bring about the changes which you need, so as to accumulate enough experiences to further your individual and group evolution. Which part of you is going to do the accumulating? Your physical self can only accumulate the results of one lifetime. Your astral body can only assess what happens to the astral self on the astral plane. I think that's a little limited, but more or less true. And what happens on the physical plane during the last few incarnations at best. Your soul, or causal body, or higher mind, however, it can retain everything which you have learned and experienced since the beginning of your incarnational cycle. It is this soul which accumulates the results of all your lives on mental, astral, and etheric physical planes. Yes, that level of your being has several names. The causal body, higher self, is a couple of them. And when you ascend to that level in meditation or in OBE, you will get that level of consciousness, that memory of many, many lives. Now, that's a lot. And it may whiz by in a hell of a rush. So maybe just going as far as the astral being, which will just give you a few lives, maybe that's enough for now. But understand that you can go much farther. And as an individual human soul is created at the moment of individualization, and behind this process is the solar deva, a being who's already very advanced, having evolved in other times and places, including other planets and other solar systems. Yes, that's been my feeling, and I mentioned that yesterday. You get to that level of consciousness and you realize that, I would say as monads, which I don't think is interchangeable with solar deva, but similar. As monads, we came to this planetary system to experience, A, to help populate it, B, to have the experience, and C, to help younger, more inexperienced souls. And this communicator, one of you who is watching and listening, had mentioned to me, we are, or they feel that we are ongoing in our Andromedan or Syrian or Pleiadian incarnations, that as we are human beings right now, we are also beings there. And I just thought V. Van Damme's experience would contribute to that conversation. The solar deva becomes the guardian angel of the soul, and the soul becomes the guardian of the personalities. The individual human ego as it takes on personality from life to life. Some would care to see the solar deva and soul as identical. However, this is not strictly correct. The soul is the human half of the evolutionary equation. The solar deva is the other devic half. The solar deva, and the soul for that matter, are buffers between the monadic self, the goddess, and the human personality, self, and they overshadow all developments with regard to the growth and evolution of that personality, or personalities, from the point of view of many lives. So there he makes a contrast between the monad, the monadic self, and the solar deva. For me, sometimes these seem like the same being, but perhaps I'm not trying hard enough to differentiate. Perhaps my contact is a little too fuzzy. But I think he explains himself quite well there. After the initial and relative primitive stages of personal growth, an individual becomes more and more evolved and sophisticated, until eventually she reaches the moment when a series of life initiations can be initiated and experienced. Then the personality self merges with the soul and the solar deva, who in turn merge with the monadic self, which permits the personality self to become conscious of and experience the monadic self directly, and thereby incurs revelations which will speed up her evolution immeasurably, leading to her in a relatively short time to transmutation, transcendence, and the realization of immortality. You'll remember my first book of essays, Confronting Your Immortality. To some degree, that was a result of contact with the monad, or higher self, which was talked about even earlier in More Adventures in Eternity. Therefore, your solar deva is an enormously powerful and very personal friend, one who can lead you towards that transcendence. She will usually present herself as a man if you are female, and as a woman if you are male. This produces a polarity differentiation which will induce a fusion of the lower with the higher, which in turn will give way to androgynous human devic consciousness. He can project part of herself down onto the astral plane so as to interact with you, the personality self, in a manner which you will find easy to identify with. He will begin to inspire, then invade your consciousness as you become more aware of her, to the extent that you will begin to feel devic as well as human. And initially this can produce a degree of polarity confusion, since you start to feel equally male as you do female, or vice versa. This can lead to transsexual feelings, and until you understand the nature of the essential androgyny which you are part of. You will usually experience your solar deva on the astral plane as an external entity who will interact with you almost as a lover or partner, as in that experience. Conversely, from time to time, you may find yourself actually taking on her projected polar identification, and therefore change your astral body form to that of the opposite sex, in line with the projected appearance of your solar deva. And this will help you to become consciously transpolarized, leading to androgynous identity after a while. who the solar deva who will interact with you almost as a lover or partner. I had a client who then became a bit of a follower for a while, some years ago, who had these experiences, and I knew it was the solar deva interacting with her at a higher level, ministering to her needs. She was quite ill at the time, and was the kindest, most loving being. And her experience of this being, of course, polarized as a male, was something like that of an angelic lover. She had no idea how to understand this, and did not think she was just fantasizing a male lover the dream world. It seemed way past that. So this would be probably 20 years ago. So I helped her, try to understand that experience. And what was interesting was that this person had no experience of New Age or occult literature at all, hadn't read anything. And it was quite a challenge. Usually, if someone's in grade 4, I can lead them up to grade 10. But on those levels, she was almost completely ignorant. So, fascinating challenge. Now, much more in this, of course, much more. And not enough time now, but I think he channels Davis in this book called Starcraft, published around the same time. And there's some pretty profound discourses on what it's like to create environments, and reflections thereof, the perfect environment, the imperfect environment, how do they feel, etc., etc. And we'll get to that very soon. And it reminds me, before we get to it, I'll just say that I have had experiences of that nature, and experiences out of body where students will say to me, well, you showed me how the planet was created. I see, I said to them, I see. So people can plug in to a higher level of yourself and interact with it, and you're not fully aware of it, or you've only got vague memories or none at all. And because they have a need to contact that higher level of you to get teachings that at the more physical, mental level, you're not quite able to give them. And I've certainly had these experiences over and over the years. And I did allude to it, more adventures in eternity, other astral versions of me floating around and doing what they feel like doing, regardless of what I'm thinking or doing or wanting. And but they are aspects of the guy that's sitting here talking to you. So with that as a little teaser, I shall bid you farewell. And may this all inspire you as it inspires me.